Welcome to Parenting GPS, navigating your parenting journey. I'm Kari Kling, the host of your show. You know, if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, there's a really good chance that right now you are at that time of year, back to school time. And whether you're in the Southern Hemisphere and it's not back to school time, no matter where you are, no matter what type of schooling your children are going to be experiencing, the tips that I'm going to share in this episode are tried and true. They're research proven, and it's the best of the best. And I hope you find it helpful, whether your children are in preschool or all the way through college. And so I want to begin by sharing with you that I have presented hundreds of parent nights all around the country and a few internationally in my 40 years of working with families as an educator and a counselor, and now wrapping that all into the role of parent coach and being a TV host. And so I could probably give you 2 hours worth at least of some tips, but we don't have that kind of time. So I'm going to give you the best of what I know for you to provide guidance and support to your child on their journey of education. And this is what I'd like to begin with first, is the goal. What is the goal of why am I even doing this? And I'd like to share my goal with you, not only for homework when you're going to school, but for everything in terms of being a parent. And here it is. It's to increase responsibility, that's the homework part, self-reliance, and independence within our children while increasing calmness and joy in our parenting. I understand as a person who's been doing this for a long time, and mostly as the mom of 21-year-old boys, I understand the homework battles. I understand you don't want to sit there and do it with them. Perhaps your kids don't want to do it. They're struggling. What if you don't even understand the content of what they're supposed to learn? How do you begin and keep the peace? Well, hopefully by the end of our time together today, you will have some answers to that question. I also want to say that no matter where in the world you live, no matter when you begin school, when you're on vacation, these tips will be helpful to you no matter what level of education your child is in and where in the world you go to school, because brain research, and this is what all of this is based on, is about the human brain. It's not about the human brain in one part of the world as opposed to another. And I'd like to begin today with sharing some thoughts with you about how to decrease those homework battles in the first place. And the first thing I'd like to include is talking about movement. You know, many children sit for a good part of the day, and when they come home, they have all this pent-up energy and sitting down to do homework. You know, I know some parents say, nope, they can't go out and play until they do their homework. That's not always the best thing, although it might be easier for the parent because the child will be able to just get it done and not worry about it. But I encourage you, first of all, to talk with your child and find out what they want and how they want to do it. Maybe your child wants to do that. They want to sit down, come home, get it done. But movement is so important. And I've done several TV shows already on Parenting GPS about movement. And I really want to encourage you to look through some of the earlier episodes about movement and building brains through movement, and look at that and how that can help your child. One of the things that I encourage you to do is when your child comes home from school is to first have them have some kind of movement, whether it's, you know, playing basketball in the driveway, if you have that option, you know, running around in the front of your home, or, you know, going to the playground, something to get that energy out and to kind of rev them up and get them ready to do that. Some kids, depending on the age, might have 5 minutes of homework. Some kids might have an hour and a half or more. It's important that you teach your children to take brain breaks. So even if they sit down and start their homework after 10, 15 minutes, that they get up and they stretch, or they do jumping jacks, or something to keep that oxygen going to their brain, to keep their bodies moving, to keep them alert. It's really important. Movement is huge. The second thing I'd like to encourage you to do before they even get started is about having a healthy snack. And having a healthy snack can include, hopefully not too much on the processed food side with the chemicals, but water to drink, protein, maybe some blueberries, kiwi, nuts, any kind of berries. I mentioned about blueberries, but foods that will help them stay alert and give their brain nourishment, their bodies and their brains nourishment, and let them have snack while they're working, and maybe get up and get another snack at some point. I know so many parents worry about, well, they won't eat their dinner. It's really important that your kids have protein before they sit down to work. Make it a healthy snack, like I said. And if they don't eat as much at dinner, it's more important that they keep that blood sugar stable and have that snack when they come home from school. So starting with movement, looking at a protein snack or some kind of healthy snack. And then the next thing I want to share with you is about guided choices. The first thing to do when it comes to guided choices is wait for everybody to be calm. If your child is upset, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do my homework, I want to go out and play, I want to do whatever. Wait until they're calm. If you're upset and they're upset, it's only going to escalate. And so do what you need to do. Talking softly, giving them guided choices is a way to calm them down in the first place. And here's some examples of what that might look like. First of all, the younger the child, the fewer choices you want to offer, because they'll spend all their time trying to figure out what is the choice I want to make. So maybe just two choices, and they can be very simple choices. Would you like to sit over here to do your homework, or would you like to sit over here in your room? Would you like to do your homework using this pencil, or would you like to use this crayon? And whatever is appropriate for the assignment, of course. Ask your child to give some of the choices. How would you like to do your homework? Would you like to sit on your bed? Would you like to sit at your desk? Would you like to sit on the floor? Would you like to have soft music on in the background? I encourage you, if you do the music, though, not to have music with lyrics, because sometimes the lyrics, the kids will focus on the lyrics and not on the homework. But soft music for concentration in the background without the music is very, very soothing and calming for most children. Incorporate the ideas about the homework when it comes to the answers. If your child says, well, what is this? What should I do? What is the answer? Where should I look? Always try to turn it back to them and say, well, what do you think? What ideas do you have about this? Have you ever done this before? Have you ever seen anything about this before? And so even if they say, no, I don't know what you're talking about and whatever, it's still okay to acknowledge and validate and say, yes, I understand you haven't done that before. And then maybe you could offer examples about, remember the time that we did this? Remember the time you learned about this? Well, this is very much like what you're doing now. And so again, the older the child is, the more independent you want them to try to be. But giving guided choices about how the child is going to do the homework, about what they're going to incorporate, what works for them, giving choices is the place to begin with guided choices. Because once again, so many children feel like school, like life, is being done to them. Get your things, we're going here, do this now, then we're doing this. And even if that's what the children need to do at that moment in time, giving them some autonomy about how they do things and the what they're going to get out of it. After all, this is their experience, is critical to them feeling like they have control. And that's one of the things that children need. We talk about, what are the needs of children? And most people talk about, oh, they need to have, good sleep and proper nutrition. And we talk about the things physically, but really what children also need, if we talk about their emotions, is they need to feel that they have control. And if you think about those temper tantrums that perhaps you experienced when your child was young, having control of the situation and wanting to express themselves could be a huge part of why that child was acting that way in the first place. And so we always have to say why. Why is the child doing that? I want to come back to a couple of other things about uh, decreasing homework battles. But first, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about one of my very favorite strategies called chunking and lots of other things that you can do. We'll be right back. The next strategy in leaving off with how to decrease homework battles that I'd like to share with you is my favorite, one of my favorites, and it's called chunking. One of the things that I know is that when young children look at an entire page of something, it can feel overwhelming. And so I encourage you to help your child chunk it out. In fact, I did this with my own children when they were little, and the teacher she said, why are all these shapes on here? I'm going to show you in a minute. And I told her what I did, and she started to do it with the entire class. She loved it. And she said all of the kids loved it. And so what we want to do, just like as an adult, if we have a big task to do, we want to break it down into smaller chunks. And so this is what I'm going to share with you and encourage you to do. Here you go. This is an example of just a math page with many problems in it. And some children might look at this and just immediately feel this wave of anxiety about, oh my gosh, I have to do all of those. But if you can show them how to chunk it out, it makes it a lot easier. And so I would encourage you to use colored pencil. It doesn't take up maybe as much room. But for the sake of the show, I wanted to make sure it was dark enough that you could see this. And so you could say to your child, pick a color and now pick a shape. So maybe the child would say orange circle. And as you can see here, I drew a circle, an orange circle around 4 of the problems. Then you could say to your child, pick another color. Okay, blue. Pick a shape. Cloud shape. Draw a blue cloud around some of the problems. You can see that that's what I did here as an example. And then you can continue with different shapes and different colors as I did here. Then you can say to your child, once you've done that, you don't have to incorporate all of the math problems or whatever the particular paper is. You can say to them, which one do you want to do first? Your child might say, I want to do the green rectangle first. Let them do the green rectangle. Then ask them to choose the other one. And then finally, they can choose at the end or even in the middle, the problems that don't have a shape. When you break things up into smaller chunks, that's why I call it chunking, like this, it adds novelty, it adds creativity, it makes it fun. And once again, it gives the child a smaller bite, if you will, of whatever it is they have to do. And they can usually get through it and apply this to anything that they want to do. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you like the idea of chunking. I hope that's helpful for you. So far, we've talked about what is our goal in looking at some of these tips for homework. We've looked at how to decrease homework battles. We've looked at the power of guided choices. And I want to share a couple of more bigger concepts with you now. The next one is how to help your child process something difficult. So if your child is trying to learn something that was so difficult, for me, it was always math. I was just not a great math student. I ended up writing a book about it though, because I wanted to overcome that, and I did. And it's called It's Not About Math, It's About Life. And I now know that the reason I struggled so much was because I was pushed ahead when I was a little girl. I went from nursery school, we didn't even call it preschool, right to first grade, because the teachers didn't know what to do with this kid that already knew how to read, and they thought I would be bored in kindergarten. Well, the problem was that developmentally, conceptually, with mathematical skills, I was not ahead. And so when I was pushed ahead, I really wasn't ready for it. And it just became a big snowball of doom and gloom, and the feeling of terror when I sat down to do a math problem or was asked to do it in front of the class. That's a topic for another show. But I understand how many children feel when they're faced with something that they don't know how to do, and they don't feel that they know how to do it. And so here's some guidelines to help you if you have a child that feels that way about all homework, a specific subject, anything, whatever applies. The first thing I'd like to include is to have you help your child reflect on a past hurdle that they overcame. So if they say, and I remember having many students and even a couple of things with my own children, I don't know how to do that. I can't do that. It's too difficult. I don't want to do it. It's important to try to connect it to something positive, and again, always acknowledge and validate. You know, I know this feels really difficult, and I've had things in my life that feel really difficult. But remember when you felt that way back in such and such a time, and connected to that. You didn't think you could do it, but you did. And so by believing in yourself, by believing that you can figure this out and I'll help you, or we'll find someone to help you, you will overcome this and you will learn this. Connecting to prior positivity with learning. Number two is the idea of a task analysis. What can your child do? Maybe that there are certain parts of a problem, let's say if it's a math problem or if it's a writing assignment, maybe there are parts of it that you know your child can do, but there are parts that you know what, they're not ready for that. They don't know how to do it. Figure out what are the different steps involved in that assignment, and what are the things that your child can do most easily, and maybe have them do that first, and then provide support and guidance with the parts that maybe they don't have as much confidence and knowledge about. The third thing, and we talked about taking a break earlier, but it's always important to take a break and then come back to it. Maybe do something else. Maybe go outside and play if you're in a situation where you can do that. Maybe just, go have a snack, go play with the dog, go do whatever, and come back to it with fresh eyes, perhaps. What resources do you have? And I wrote Khan Academy here. If you're not familiar with Khan Academy, it is online, KHAN, as you can see. Khan Academy is a global resource that is free. I highly recommend it. It started out with a man who was trying to help, I believe it was his nephew, with some math problems. And the story I've heard is he sat in his closet and he did it for him online. He showed him how to do it. And it has grown from very, very young children all the way up to postgraduate work in every subject imaginable. And so that is my number one go-to for a resource for your child if they're having difficulty in any subject, and you can just go to the skill that they're having difficulty with, whether it's something mathematical, writing a topic sentence, something about space. It is a comprehensive and, once again, free resource. And if you don't know about it, run to your computer as soon as the show is over and look it up. Khan Academy, KHAN Academy. I'm not sure if it's .com or .org, but you'll find it, I'm sure. And then lastly, teach your child about using acronyms and mnemonics to help them remember things. The first, or a song. If you remember something in a song, if you can put it in a song, you will always remember it. Many of us have heard songs on the radio, or we've heard a song somewhere that perhaps we hadn't heard in 20 or 30 or 40 years, but we'll remember the words when we hear it. because our brains are pattern seekers. And anytime we learn something in a rhythm, a rant, a rhyme, or a chant, our brains will remember that. So if it's a spelling words, if it's, ways to remember about how to write an essay, the steps involved in a science experiment, anything, have your child make up a song about it, and they will not forget it. Some of my favorite examples of acronyms, and these are very common, I learned them in elementary school and I still remember them, is for example, the Great Lakes in the United States. I know we have people watching from all over the world. To remember that, just remember homes: Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior, the names of the Great Lakes. I remember when I was a little girl in 6th grade, we were learning about ancient civilizations, and I could never remember how to spell Egypt. I always switched the Y and the P. And my 6th grade teacher came up to me one day and he said, egg white. And I remember thinking, what is he talking about? Egg wiped? Excuse me. He said, just think egg wiped, and you'll remember how to spell Egypt. E-G-Y-P-T. It helped me, and I've never forgotten to this day. Let your child understand how their brain is a pattern-seeking device. And once again, if they can create a rhythm, a rhyme, a song, a chant to remember what it is they're trying to remember, they will not forget. The last thing I want to share with you today, and before we have some questions from our viewers, and I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest, very, very condensed version of this. And that is about something called the multiple intelligences. And the multiple intelligences, I could spend a week on this. It's so exciting to understand how we learn. And the reason I'm not going to spend more time on this right now is because I have a surprise coming for you next week, and I'll tell you that in just a moment. But here's what we know about the 8 smarts, or the multiple intelligences. The multiple intelligences are a wonderful and exciting way to help your child understand how he or she learns best. And we know that there are at least 8 different ways or processes of learning new information and understanding them in a way that results in solving a problem or creating a product. And this information comes to us from Dr. Howard Gardner from Harvard University way back in 1981. Dr. Thomas Armstrong has taken so much of his information, and in the last 30 years or so has written books and created videos and shared ideas about what this really looks like. And I am thrilled to share with you right now that my next episode next week will feature Dr. Thomas Armstrong. He is going to be on the show giving us very specific examples and explaining to us how the multiple intelligences work and why sometimes kids may have problems in school, not because they have a label that there's something wrong with them, but because maybe they're not being asked to learn something in the way that their brain learns best. I hope you'll watch it next week. I'm so excited to have Dr. Armstrong on the show. So here are the 8 intelligences, just very, very quickly. We have the verbal linguistic intelligence, which is how we learn from reading, from looking at words, from talking to someone else. We have the logical mathematical intelligence, which we usually associate with numbers and looking at the world logically. We also know that there's a high connection between the logical mathematical intelligence and the musical intelligence. It's that rhythm, that music, that beat that helps process information. So we have the verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, the musical intelligence, and the next one is the spatial or picture smart intelligence, where those are people that we think of as people that need to see a picture of it. They need to visualize a picture of it. And that's what they remember. That's how they remember things. They see the world in images and pictures as opposed to words. The fifth kind of smart or intelligence is the bodily kinesthetic intelligence, or body smart. We think of our athletes and our actors, people that use their bodies to express themselves, who use their body to convey a message, and they need to build something, perhaps build a model of it to better understand it. They need to act it out. So many kids that sometimes we call, well, they're a little ADHD. They move around a lot and they can't sit still. Sometimes they're just really, really high in the bodily kinesthetic intelligence. We're going to talk about all of this next week. Looking at self-smart, people who need that quiet time to reflect and to process information, and they don't want to talk about it with somebody else. They just want to have time to think, as opposed to interpersonal intelligence or people smart, who need to talk with other people to help them process information. I always laugh, and when I was working with schools, and say I used to get in trouble for talking in school, and now I get paid for it. So and things change as people get older. Perhaps someone, I never thought of myself as a self-smart intrapersonal person that needed quiet time to think about things. I wanted to talk to other people about, well, what do you think about this? And how does that relate to that? But the older I am, the older I get, the more I find that I need that quiet time. And lastly is about the nature smart, or the natural intelligence, nature smart, that looking at our environment to help us process the world around us. My point is that there are some people that see the world through their nature smart. We think about kids that are, collecting bugs, and everything is about being out in nature, and that's really probably the most natural, because if we look at our ancestry as human beings. The point about back to school tips for homework is it's important to have a great understanding, a deep understanding of how your child best learns and how to support your child. Most of what happens in traditional schools is verbal, linguistic, or logical, mathematical. That may not be the strength of your child's processing. So we have to understand how to help them become more strong as we use the strength that they have. Notice I didn't say weakness. It's just not as developed. Let me give you one quick example. It's a true story. There was a little girl who loved to play the piano. She could sit down at the piano and make up songs, and just that was her joy. She loved to read, but she didn't like to write very much. And so she had a book report due. And one day it was time for her to do the book report, and her mom, asked her when she wanted to do the book report, and if she didn't want to do it, she didn't want to do it. And the mom had learned about the 8 smarts. And so the mom said, I have an idea. Why don't you sit down at your piano and make up a song about your book that you just read? And the little girl was so excited. And in literally about 8 minutes, she had this song about her book. And the mom then said to her, why don't you write that down so you don't forget it? So the little girl wrote down her song, and that became the basis for her book report. So it's about using the child's strength to help access the areas that are not as developed. It's important when you work with your child for homework. It's important, most of anything, for your child to understand this about themselves, so that they can make decisions for their entire life about how they best learn. I hope you have found these tips to be helpful. And when we come back from our break, we are going to take some questions regarding homework from our viewers. We'll be right back. This is the part of the show where we take questions from viewers, and in keeping with the navigation theme of my show, I like to call it Your Parenting Destination. And we have 2 questions today from our viewers. And the first one is from Margie in Fort Collins. And Margie writes, my son is 8 years old, and even though he can do his homework by himself, he wants me to just sit at our homework table with him. Each time I try to leave, he has a meltdown. What can I do? And I'm going to encourage you, Margie. It's obviously about security. And so I wouldn't just say, okay, I'm not going to be sitting there with you today, but to systematically decrease that time. And so maybe begin by sitting with him and getting him started, and then just say, I'm going to go check on something in the kitchen or whatever. I'll be back in a minute. And then come back in a minute and let him see that he could do it by himself. And I would just continue to do that a few times and make the time frames that you're gone a little bit longer, and get him to see that he can do that by himself. And then let him know that he must be so proud of himself because he is doing it all by himself. And then let him know that he's showing you that he can, and that you're going to be in the room right next door if he needs you. And then just let him do it. And I would encourage you to do it that way. I hope that helps. Our second question today is from Leah in Carson City. And Leah writes, my 10-year-old son always does his homework independently, but then he forgets to turn it in, and his grade suffers because it's late. How can I help? This is not an uncommon situation, Leah. So many kids have done that. And I encourage you, maybe put a piece of yarn around his wrist, or a little sticky note on his notebook. Have him come up with a way that he thinks would be helpful for him, so that he's got some kind of a reminder to look at school that helps him remember, oh yeah, I have to turn it in. You might also want to talk with the teacher initially about setting up some kind of a system, a reminder. At first, you want him to be independent, but maybe a little bit of a support to get him back on the right path. And so I hope this show today has been helpful for you. If you have one new idea to help you in working with your child, whether it's with homework, if you're homeschooling, whatever it is, then that's wonderful. And I'd love to hear from you and find out what was helpful for you. And I'd like to close today with a quote, and it's one of my favorite quotes. I didn't make it up, and I don't know who did. It's anonymous. Somebody said it, but I don't know who it is. So if you know, please let me know. And it goes like this: whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. One of the most important things about our child's journey in learning is getting them to recognize that they may not be able to do whatever it is that they're learning right now, but that they will be able to do it, that they can overcome any hurdles that they may face, and that they will be able to find the tools with your guidance, with the guidance of the teacher, whomever is working with them, to be able to do anything that they want to do in their lives. Thank you, friends. See you next week.